So welcome everyone to this session. It takes a village, but where do I start?
Sorry, I was waiting for more. This session, It Takes a Village, but Where Do I Start, is presented to you by Fostering Unity. The mission of Fostering Unity is to build better tomorrows for children and youth in out-of-home placement through direct caregiver support and family strengthening. My name is Dana Fryer, and I'm the Director of Operations at Fostering Unity. My experience with the foster care system is both personal and professional. I've combined my social work and organizational leadership degrees to spend much of my career working to improve the child welfare system. I'm also a former foster parent who's had the privilege of becoming extended family to 4 children who successfully reunited with their mom. I now carry the proud title of Aunt Dana. I also adopted my youngest son after reunification was no longer a possibility. Reimagining the child welfare system through a lens of systemic change and family strengthening is really, truly my passion. In my free time, I enjoy spending time with my adult children, traveling and relaxing near the ocean. I am still a busy mom who's fueled by Diet Coke, coffee, and a little bit of sarcasm.
Thank you, Dana. My name is Alexa Weissar. I am the social media and marketing manager at Fostering Unity. A little bit about me. I grew up in a family who both fostered and adopted. I got to experience firsthand the joys of reunification as well as adoption, as well as what happens when the entire team works together and the system works in favor of those who are fostering and or adopting. If I am not working, I am probably at a bookstore buying another book. I am looking at another country to travel to. I also love going to spin class and baking in my free time. So now that you know a little bit about us, we want to know a little bit about you. We have a couple questions here. So you can drop them in the chat. We would love to kind of get to know a little bit about yourself. So in your life, do you know a youth involved in foster care or who has been involved in foster care? We'll give you a minute to respond. Awesome, lots of yeses, that's great. Ooh. Perfect. Love to see it. All right, so question 2. In your life, do you know of an individual who is a caregiver? Caregiver is another term for foster parent, or maybe they were involved in a family who fostered. And again, you can drop them in the chat. Just love to see how everyone is connected. Perfect. All right, last question. Do you think your life makes an impact on a youth in foster care or a caregiver? Again, you can drop your answer into the chat. And it's okay if it's a yes or a no. There's no right answer here. Yeah, maybe you're unsure, hoping so. Awesome. All right. So you're probably wondering how on earth this presentation might tie to the topic of this conference, which is reimagining healthy sexual development for youth in foster care by thinking outside of the system. So to quickly answer that, so we can kind of be open to the rest of the presentation, when we're confident and aware of our roles and connections to those in care, we can start to set aside our bias and start accepting current policies, laws, curriculum, and implementing that knowledge and awareness into our actions in a meaningful way. Our confidence is going to allow us to start thinking outside of the system and prioritize the needs that we can identify for our youth in care. Right now, we're going to stick with this visual, this puzzle. All of the pieces are jumbled. The bigger picture isn't quite clear, and we're not sure where this is going. We know that eventually it's going to make a picture. We're just unsure how. So when someone doesn't know their role, doesn't understand the impact or repercussions of their words or actions, or simply just doesn't care enough to try, this big picture isn't going to make sense. What we do know is that with a little effort, with a little thinking, this will all connect. So hold on to this visual. We're going to keep coming back to it the rest of the presentation. All right, so we've broken this down into 3 parts, trying to make it as easy as possible. We're going to talk about the internal, the team, and the community, and how each part plays a role in each other and for the bigger picture. We're going to start with part 1, which is internal. This is where we're going to start to unpack our role, and we're going to start to understand it and talk about how our education and training makes a difference. There are a lot of roles that connect back to youth experiencing foster care. It can be a close connection, like if you're a caregiver or a social worker. It can be a slightly extended role, like if you're their teacher or maybe their doctor. It can be an extended supportive role, like if you're a part of an after-school program or you're a part of an organization who provides services, or maybe your friend is a caregiver. So think about the person or people that you thought about in our first 3 questions, and think about your role in relation to them and their life. What is your connection? If you feel like sharing, and I did see a couple in the chat, we'd love to know what your role is in their life. Maybe you're their teacher, maybe you're their friend, or you support them through services. There's a couple of ideas on the screen, but we'd love to know what role you play in the lives of youth in care. Oh, a sex ed teacher, that's a great one. Awesome. A lot of educators here. I love it. While you keep dropping those in the chat and keep them coming, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my example, which is my role. So as I mentioned earlier, I am the social media and marketing manager at Fostering Unity. So you might think, how on earth does this role impact the life of youth in care? I hang out on social media. Well, I do a lot when I started to unpack my role. So for starters, I work at an organization who provides services to caregivers. I make sure that our caregivers and community members can access our Facebook support group. I make sure that that support group stays up and running. It remains a safe space for people to turn to. I also make sure that, oh, I am getting told that my slides are not changing. Is that true? Is that?
No, they're changing. I see Alexa.
Okay, cool. Just making sure. Sorry, I want to make sure technology is working. Okay, so I make sure that the Zoom virtual support groups for caregivers to turn to are recurring so that they can always access them. I also make sure that the communication is out there. So without telling people that these services exist via social media, email marketing, actual marketing, then they won't know where to turn. So through Fostering Unity, I am able to communicate all of these services and resources and connections so that they know where to turn. I also am lucky enough to assist with the Reproductive Health Equity Project and the National Center for Youth Law in their podcast, Fostering Parenthood. I am able to help spread the word on this resource through social media, their Instagram and Facebook, as well as help with any other marketing needed for that podcast. Without this podcast, caregivers might not know that there's an innovative new tool for them to use. Ultimately, my role helps caregivers access resources in real time. They know where to turn to, they know that it's there, and then they don't have to stress or panic. They know where to turn, which ultimately affects the youth in their care. So now that we're feeling a little confident in our role, maybe our cogs are turning, we're like, oh yeah, there is a tie to youth in care. I am making an impact. We want to start to look at how we can grow within those roles. What are we doing to further our impact in education? How are we staying up to date? We know that this world is ever changing with systems, policies, laws, all of it. So we need to dedicate ourselves within our role to continue our education.
Thank you, Alexa. That's a great example. I think what is being said about the slides, Alexa, is they're cut off on one side. Just to let you know, that's what I see on the screen. I'm not sure if that's what other people see, but
Any better? Sorry.
yes, it is. Thank
Sorry,
you.
everyone.
That's okay. Thank you. In this work, if we fail to continue to educate ourselves, we're becoming an obstacle to growth, opportunity, and improvement. The laws, policies, and guidelines are changing rapidly. We saw that in the keynote address, right? Things are changing rapidly, not rapidly enough, right? We're reverting back in some areas, but current laws are changing rapidly. It is in our best interest to keep up with them in order to structure our actions and mindset with the most current and up-to-date information. Continuing education requires knowing what the current policies and system changes are, being aware of our biases, and being willing to remove those biases. We need to invest in personal and professional growth, apply what we learn, and then also share what we learn, that information, with others to better meet the needs of our youth. I'm going to cover just a few kind of critical topics that we should all be informed on. Some of them were also mentioned in the keynote. Additional information and links will be provided at the end of our presentation so that you can have additional information and dive deeper into these. But SB 89, the Sexual and Reproductive Wellness in Foster Care, went into effect July 1st, 2017. It has 5 intended impact components and training requirements specific to caseworkers, resource parents, and judges. But even if our role is not one listed in these requirements, it is our responsibility to understand the components of SB 89. AB 175, the Foster Youth Bill of Rights, was signed into law to ensure that every child, teen, and young adult experiencing foster care has a safe and nurturing home and family. Every person who is experiencing foster care deserves to be valued and respected, to have a say in making decisions that affect their lives, and to have access to help when needed, to have support that will help them reach their chosen goals as successful and healthy adults. I think it's sad we have to put this into law. Obviously, we put it into law for a reason, and those just basic respectful rights were not being adhered to. Trauma-informed training is essential to all of us who work in the child welfare system. This training is intended to help trauma-exposed children and youth achieve safety, connection, and empowerment. And we know that just the act of removing a child from their home or a youth from their home will create trauma. Overdose awareness and harm reduction. The California school-based health centers prevent and treat substance abuse. The school-based health centers are ideal places to identify youth using substances and to provide evidence-based services that inform them about the health risks associated with alcohol and drug use. These centers can also support behavior changes and address life experiences or issues that may be the underlying issue behind the substance abuse. Another great resource is available to you is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, known as SAMHSA. And again, we're going to have links to all of these at the end of this presentation. Excuse me, I'm going to grab a little drink of water. I have a dry throat today. Roughly 54,000 children and youth are the legal responsibility of the state of California after being removed from their family homes due to abuse or neglect. The trauma of abuse and the separation from their families puts them at a higher risk for adverse consequences throughout their lives, from houselessness to suicide, from exploitation to sex trafficking. The National Awareness for Mental Health, also known as NAMI, can provide additional information and support for youth experiencing mental health concerns or diagnoses. There are several state and nationwide platforms that are accessible to youth in a time of need. Here are just a couple examples. California Youth Crisis Line, which is a call-only line. Your Life, Your Voice, which offers call, chat, text, email options, which we know our youth these days, just a call line probably is not meeting them where they're at. The Trevor Lifeline, which is specific to the LGBTQIA plus community, offers call, chat, email, and text. And the National Runaway Safe Line also offers call, chat, email, and text. Another change that has happened is AB 167216. It redefined graduation requirements for foster youth and also youth in military families who transfer high schools after their second year. This law is intended to address the gap of losing credits when moving or changing schools. Youth experiencing foster care can graduate by completing the minimum state graduation requirements if at the time of transfer they cannot reasonably complete additional local school district requirements within the 4 years of high school. I'm just going to share something real quick. We were the first ones to use that for my son in his senior year. I wanted him to go for that additional English requirement that he needed. I also had to realize he was turning 18. He didn't want to be there. And so the choice was to risk him not graduating because he didn't return for that final credit, or to use this law that passed, and we opted to use it. There were hoops to jump through, but the good news is he left with a degree, even though he was lacking one English credit. So most of us here today have some personal or professional connection with youth experiencing foster care. Understanding your why are you here, and continually aligning yourself with the reason that you're here will ensure that you don't lose sight of your role. So we got to look at, why do we care, right? These aren't easy jobs. So why are we here? Why do we care? And we're going to look at what happens if we lose sight of our role, what happens if we don't understand our role, and what happens if we just don't care to educate ourselves to do our role better. Knowing your strengths allows you to step in on topics and situations that you're an expert in and make an impact. If you don't understand your strengths, you could be missing the youth could be missing a huge advocate in their lives. If you keep your biases involved in your relationship, it could create an obstacle for the youth and stunt the ability for growth, stability, and independence. If you don't stay up to date on education and policy changes and modern guidelines, you can't provide accurate care, support, or resources for the youth, which could become a barrier for them. And if you're just not invested enough to hone your role, if you're not invested enough to hone the role you play in the life of youth experiencing foster care, you may be standing in the way of someone who could fulfill that role.
Yes, continuing our education is critical. I actually have a note here because in the keynote session, Dr. Bridges said that young folks need to have access to authoritative figures with knowledge and resources to guide them. And I think that's huge. If our young folks don't know who to turn to and they do not trust who they turn to, then how can we move forward? So we want to acknowledge that things are ever changing, platforms are changing, resources are changing, and we will provide you a list with everything we know, but we're also curious. In your role, field, and profession, where do you go for up-to-date information? What resources and organizations do you use? We would love to hear about where you access all of this so that we can then expand our knowledge. If you want to drop them in the chat, we would love to. You could drop their website, their name, but where do you go to find your updated information? We'll give you a minute to maybe think on it, drop it in the chat. We don't have any right now. That's okay. Ooh, thank you, Tamara. All right, if any come up while we continue this presentation, please just drop them. That would be awesome. All right, so we're back to our little puzzle. I told you not to lose sight of this. We've started to identify our role. which then corresponds to the role of each of these pieces. We know that edges play a role in defining the border and that the corner pieces are going to connect those. So now we're trying to look internally at ourselves, our role. How can we start to define it? And how can we use our education and our training to start connecting all of these roles? So we're starting to build our bigger picture. All right, that brings us to part 2, the team. So we tend to be a very individualistic society, but we just can't do this alone. So that's where our team comes in. So who's on this team? Who are we working with to help youth in foster care? And how are our actions going to impact this team? We're not going to leave you guessing because there is nothing more frustrating than trying to figure out something on your own or feeling like you have to ask a million questions to get one answer. All right, so we're going to picture this as a football team. And when creating this presentation, I tried to come up with a million ways to visualize this, and I struggled. I'm not going to lie. So football team is where we landed. There are a lot of California-based organizations, so I tried to target my audience by using the Los Angeles Chargers. Personally, I'm a Washington girl, go Seahawks. But if you are more of a Niners fan or a Rams fan, make this visual work for you. Okay, so we all know that a football team is huge. There are many moving parts, but they're all working together for the same goals, and they utilize their strengths with the guidance of coaches to make that happen. We all know that the quarterback is the key player. So for the sake of this visual, the youth in care is going to be our quarterback. And we're going to talk about the team who protects them. So with our youth in care being the quarterback and the rest of us being the team, let's look at what that team consists of. We have our family of origin. We have our foster family, kinship caregivers, social workers, caseworkers, support services, and medical services. When it comes to football, there isn't just one coach. There are multiple coaches that help with their designated fields. So the same goes for the youth team. Our coaches are going to include the law, policymakers, DCFS, and licensing agencies. These are going to be the team members who tell us what's allowed, what's not allowed, and they're going to be there to help provide clarity and answer questions when we are struggling to know what's next. They're going to be the people we go to for answers.
So every football team has support individuals to help promote their success before, during, and after the game, and so do our youth. For our analogy, these individuals are going to be organizations that are here to offer support, education, and awareness for the success of the youth while they're in care and after they are reunified or adopted. Fostering Unity is a community-based organization serving families and youth in LA County. We are committed to improving outcomes for children and youth in foster care through child-centered family strengthening programs, enhanced community partnerships, and intentional caregiver support. The Reproductive Health Equity Project for Foster Youth, who sponsored this conference, REP, brings together youth in foster care and the agencies that serve them to promote systems that normalize, support, and promote body autonomy and healthy sexual development. Health, education, and child welfare systems have failed to reach, engage, and guide youth experiencing foster care throughout their sexual and reproductive health service journey in a way that meets their needs, circumstances, and goals. This gap fuels disparity in sexual and reproductive health. The mission of California Youth Connection, which is a youth-led organization, is to develop leaders who empower each other and their communities to transform the foster care system through legislation, policy, and practice change. The California Youth Connection has different chapters throughout the state of California. I encourage you to let your youth know to become involved in CYC. Court-appointed special advocates, also known as CASAs, are volunteers who are appointed by judges to advocate for the best interest of abused or neglected youth in the court setting and in other settings. This is just a few examples of organizations, but it tells you who's on the team, and we should be utilizing many of these. When we know who's on the team and we know their role and their strengths and their purpose, we can start utilizing one another to benefit the youth experiencing foster care. If they have questions regarding sexual development, we can tap into our current knowledge of laws and policies to help guide them. We can let them know they can talk to their doctor. They can reach out to REP. They can listen to one of the podcasts that focuses on healthy sexual development, or they can talk to their therapist, or many other options. If they have legal questions, we know there's advocates or similar organizations that are available and can connect them. If they have questions about court, we know that CASA is available and can be a supportive member of the team. Once a referral happens, we can then follow up to make sure they got what they needed rather than letting the situation be dropped. By following up with our youth, we're encouraging them to continue to ask for help. We're building trust as adults in their lives, and we're supporting their journey to autonomy and advocacy. This is super important. I think we cannot work in silos. We cannot work against one another and expect positive outcomes or improved placement stability. It is crucial and in the best interest of the youth who are experiencing the child welfare system for all members of the team to be well informed and working toward the same goals. Child and family team meetings are where goals and intended outcomes for our children and youth are set. Make sure the facilitator of these meetings provides written documentation of what needs to be done, who will do what, and the timeline to accomplish the tasks after every meeting. Here's a couple just key things on how to communicate. Facts first. Again, remove biases, stick with facts. That the whole CFTM is supposed to be youth and child centered. We got to make sure we realign with that. Write out the objectives and tasks and always include date and your name. The benefit to being centered and aligned on how to communicate is that communication stays clear. Individuals know when it's their turn to step up, and advocacy is tracked and can be referred back to. Information can be cross-referenced and updated as needed. We've done a lot of work identifying our roles, how they can connect to one another, and how they can play into the team. Looking at our puzzle, we can see that by identifying how everything works together, fits together, and has a purpose, a clear picture starts to emerge.
Awesome. So we've made it to part 3. We're almost done. So referring back to the title of the session, we now know where we need to start. But now we want to talk about our village, which is also our community. So a lot of this, you might be like, yeah, I've heard this a million times, but I promise that, the basics are honestly the best. Engage and participate. So we all know what it feels like to not belong to something. But once we find people with similar interests, intentions, and goals, you start to find a sense of belonging and purpose. And then you start to build the confidence to speak up, share ideas, and create innovative pathways. So the same goes for our foster community. We need you to be an expert in your role and step into your community. Some ways to do that are by speaking at events, just like this conference. You can also start to volunteer with different organizations. You can be on a board of the organizations. We are always looking for community members to want to participate and engage. You can speak about your areas of expertise on one of our podcasts. These podcasts cover so many different topics. Season 1 of Fostering Parenthood covered consent, LGBTQ youth. It also talked about resources available in California to caregivers. We are always looking for new ideas. And so be an expert in your field. You can always bring them to us, and we would love to hear from you. You can also join groups that match your role so that you guys can band together, or you all can band together in efforts to create change and improvement. Share the information. I think one of the biggest things that we don't realize is an obstacle is that we sometimes let information die with us. We hear it, we learn it, and then we stop. So make sure to tell your peers about information you've learned, whether it's over coffee, in support groups, in team meetings, or email, text, and phone call. Allow that information to move to the next person. You can also share informational posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of the social media platforms. Follow accounts. If you want to drop in the chat the organization you're from, we can start building this community, following one another, liking and commenting, and resharing that information. Once again, if it stops with us, then there's no way that it can get to the person who needs it. Make sure to share resources with your peers. If you know of resources like the podcast or an organization who specializes like advocates in the legal area and you hear them talking about their need, share that information. Don't just sit there, nod, and listen. Give them reasons to access this information. All right, and support. Make sure we are there for each other, because the only way we can move forward is if we have the support of one another. Support organizations like REP, Nickel, Advocates, JBay, Fostering Unity. Again, if you want to drop the organization you're a part of in the chat, we can start supporting one another. When we start making efforts to be involved, to support, to engage, that is where we can start changing and improving systems. Carry organizations' business cards, brochures, know their websites, so that when opportunities arise, like we had talked about earlier, where do you go for resources? Where do you go for updated information? You can provide that. All right, here we are with our little visual. We got one piece left. So we know our role, we know how it impacts the team, and we know how it benefits the community. All that's left is putting this information and awareness into action. We need to actually put it into practice in our life, and that is putting that final piece in. So ultimately, us dedicating our role and impact to the greater good will create improvements in systems. It will create innovative pathways for others to follow. And most importantly, it's going to create hope for our youth in care. So we're going to bring this full circle for you. When we follow the tie from ourselves and our role to the team, to the community, we are creating lifelines for youth in care. We are giving them a reason to trust what we say and what we do, so that they can focus on asking questions, healing from their trauma, and experiencing their childhood just like their peers. As Dr. Bridges mentioned in the session earlier, we ought to be working towards the goal in which young folks have access to authoritative figures who have knowledge and resources to guide them in their life, which includes their healthy sexual journey. We need to be those knowledgeable adults. Cody, who also spoke, mentioned that youth in foster care are having to advocate for themselves alone, which is scary. We need to do more to help them advocate so that it's less scary and more empowering. We can only do that if we are confident in our roles and our impact. All of this interconnectivity allows the child to feel supported by every adult in their corner so that they can focus on their future. So I want to drop a couple links for you so that you can start supporting and engaging in your community. I'll drop the Fostering Unity social media, as well as the Fostering Parenthood. Just give me 1 sec to do that for you. Links are a lot easier. Just click. So I'm going to include the Fostering Unity Instagram and Facebook. If you know of a caregiver or you're a part of the foster community, we also have a private group that you can be a part of. You just have to answer the group rules, which are basic: be nice, be supportive, contribute. And then also the Fostering Parenthood podcast Instagram is available, as well as its Facebook. Awesome. And then also Fostering Unity is in partnership with REP on the Fostering Parenthood podcast. But REP also just launched the Self-Taught podcast, which is former foster youth talking about their experiences. And so I wanted to name drop that podcast. I believe they have 3 episodes out right now. But while you're at it, make sure to give them a follow. And then, give me one sec. We wanted to show you really quick the Fostering Parenthood season 1 compilation, which was put together by our wonderful podcast producer, Chloe LaValle. This just kind of gives you a sense of what resources are out there. And so when we first created this podcast, in our mind, we were thinking this is going to be for caregivers, it's going to help them out. But immediately upon starting this project, we learned that it's not just for caregivers. It is for educators. It is for social workers. It is for anyone who is involved in the foster community. So we're just going to take a couple minutes to watch that. If for any reason you cannot hear or anything like that, just let me know.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Daniels, and I'm the podcast host for Fostering Parenthood. I'm also a caregiver. In season 1, we shared in laughter. We learned tips and tools. We also had some heartfelt moments. Here are some clips from season 1. I don't like the term self-care. In fact, when social workers or anyone else says, well, what are you doing for self-care? I go, I don't know. What are you doing for self-care? Try to have 6 kids in your home and then go light a candle. Good luck.
My hair's just changed in every single episode going out. My hair's all red in the first one, and I hate it. Came out like that on accident. And I never fixed it because I was like, maybe nobody will recognize me if I do a really bad job because I would never have red hair. I don't like it.
I love it. Well, maybe I'll try that, right?
Try to red.
Different color every episode. Yeah, that'd be great.
The plan was if there was ever an unsafe situation, that they would text a word to me. And it would be a word that if somebody else grabbed their phone in an unsafe situation, they wouldn't recognize the word. Our word was Mayberry. What I knew is if I received that from my kids, I wouldn't call to ask. I would get in my car and go directly where they were. Now, we also had to share locations, right? And not because I wanted to be up in their space, because it was a safety plan. So if they used that word, I just dropped everything, went directly to where they were. And I said, we have a family emergency. I need you to come with me. If in that time they're like, no, I'm fine now. Nope. That's not how the safety plan works. You initiate the safety plan. I move immediately without question. You come with me immediately without question. Then we can work through it at home. But the idea of a safety plan is that you're really in a situation you cannot remove yourself from. You need your trusting adult to step in. And so I bring that up in this because we know that, we might be in a situation where we gave consent, we pulled back consent, and is that person accepting it? Am I safe? And so we just called that our out plan, right? Our safety plan.
Can you define non-binary? Thank you.
I can. So non-binary is a term that a lot of people are a bit confused about, but it's basically an umbrella term for anybody who is not fully male or female. Some people who identify as non-binary might consider themselves to be a combination of male and female. Some people who identify as non-binary might consider themselves to be not male or female at all.
And don't sleep on your CASAs. So I learned something this year about a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate. I learned 2 things. Because CASAs are appointed by the court, they're volunteer. They're not paid by anyone. They are assigned by the judge. They have the judge's ear where a lot of us don't. And so they can go and ask things from the judge. So if your child has a CASA, make sure you find out if they like apples or brownies and keep them supplied.
When you're sitting in a car and you're going someplace, who is the person who is going to make the decision on where you're going? The driver, right? So if you're the passenger in that automobile, you're going where that driver is going to drive you. You really don't have a choice. You don't have a brake. You don't have a steering wheel. You don't even have a blinker. So you're pretty much going where that driver is going. And so what I used to tell my children all the time is you need to make sure before you get in that passenger seat that you're both going in the same place with the
Right.
same idea. Because if you haven't made your mind up in advance and haven't agreed to that location, that destination, you're going to go where the driver takes you. And it's very much like consent.
Have like equal standards for
Mm.
your gay kids and straight kids and bi kids, for your also asexual kids. I haven't mentioned that very much, but asexuality is where you're just not attracted to anyone. There are kids
Right.
who are like that. There are adults who are like that.
Mhm.
But also your trans kids and your like cis kids have like similar standards, because like, for example, if you have like a straight daughter and you're just like, no sleepovers with boys, you better also say for your gay son, no sleepovers with boys. Like one of the like,
Absolutely,
instead of
right? I mean,
or if you're okay with your straight daughter having sleepovers with boys, you better also be okay with your gay son having sleepovers with boys. Don't have a double standard.
I also think that we try to protect young ones no matter what. We try to protect them from seeing conflict with adults. And I think within reason, I don't think we should be protecting them. I think we should be showing them the conflict and the resolution and how we go about fixing those problems, not necessarily keeping it behind closed doors with, some
that's
discretion.
such good advice. Even using techniques like mirroring, oh, I hear your feeling, right? Just to kind of check and balance that you're on the same page would be really helpful tools.
I didn't feel very accepted and I didn't feel very safe in my environment. I didn't
Was-
even come out as trans until I turned 18, and I finally was able to get my own apartment, because I just did not feel safe or secure being able to confide that into my old foster family, who unfortunately
Wow.
also was in it for the money, got rid of me when I turned 18. It was a struggle. I really wish I had a supportive family, because that would have changed a lot. I might have been able to transition earlier. I might have been able to embrace my full self earlier.
I'll never forget, almost to the day, to the minute that you called me mom for the first time. For 3 years, I didn't have a name. I wasn't Aunt Dorothy. I wasn't Dorothy. I wasn't Miss Daniels. I wasn't, I was, hey, you, or you would wait until I looked at you so that then you could ask me a question because you didn't know how to call me over.
Yeah.
And I remember in the kitchen, still to this moment, that you said, Mom. And I turned around and I went to myself, did you just call me Mom? And it was probably one of the happiest days of my life. Can you share a little bit about that? Because I don't know what made that happen.
And so that was a little bit of season 1. We are currently in process of season 2, which is incredibly exciting. The last clip was actually Dorothy Daniels, Fostering Unity's executive director, having the talk with her son, which was a bonus episode that we did, but we figured, why not see it in real life, see how it goes, dive into the uncomfortable conversation, and then also be ready, utilize the conversations we had all season with all of the topics and apply them to this conversation. So if you're interested in that one, it is a tearjerker, but it's called The Talk, Fostering Parenthood. We also want to take a minute because I know that we provided a lot of resources. So if you want to scan this QR code or go to fosteringunity.org/community service, community services, all of those resources are available.
I hope that through through this presentation, you kind of maybe got a chance to realign or feel your cup filled again, or feel a little bit more excitement. We work in a tough field where our systems have historically failed our children. And I often compare it to being out in the middle of the ocean with water wings on. And so I really hope that you found something from this presentation that maybe just helped a little bit for you. And hopefully just watching the compilation, you can share that information with your coworkers, foster parents. I mean, the story that Patrick shared breaks my heart. It's hard for me to even talk about it without tearing up because his foster family failed him. And those are things we need to hear so that we keep doing better. We got to do better. We got to be better. And we can do that if we all work together. So hopefully Alexa gave you all of the QR codes and things like that for the podcast. There's also a youth podcast. We do incorporate youth in our caregiver podcast because it's important for us to hear lessons learned and to do things better. And we also give tips and tricks and tools in all of the podcasts. So I really hope that this was encouraging to you. And I want to open it up for questions. So if you want to type your questions into the chat, that would be wonderful. And if we don't have a whole lot of questions, we're going to open up. We want to hear from you. What do you do? What did you get anything out of this? Was there, share with us a little bit about you. And Alexa, I don't see a lot of questions. So I see some names that I recognize in the participant list. Madonna, are they able to unmute themselves so that they can introduce themselves, share a little bit about their work in this field?
Yeah, let me just go ahead and confirm that they're able to do that.
Okay.
And there is one question that we got on Whova, so I'll be sure to relay that. Let me just double check to see if there's any, if everyone's able to unmute themselves. Yes, everyone is able to unmute themselves if they're willing to share. But oh, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Nani, and I'm a youth advocate at West Coast Children's Clinic for foster youth. Yeah, that's pretty much my role. Well, it's a job for youth who have been in foster care, and then they could get the job to advocate for other youth in foster care after they transition out.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing.
Also, if you want to drop in the chat, like if there's a link to go to so that people know where they can go, that'd be awesome, because that is a great role to have.
And we at Fostering Unity, just to put this out there and let you guys know, we have a youth mentoring program, and we have a virtual meeting with our youth on Thursdays, excuse me. I obviously don't lead that one, but if you're ever interested in popping into one of those meetings and connecting with youth who are where you were and sharing on topics or anything like that, please share your information with us. We would love to have you join. And that group is called Tomorrow's About You, because Tay, right? But we wanted to say tomorrow is about you. We truly believe that. And the facilitator of that group is former foster youth and also a current caregiver. And so if you're interested, we'd love to have people drop in and speak at that group.
Yes, we also have Coffee with Caregivers. So if you are an educator or whatever your role is, if you're like, I would love to share more about it or talk on a certain subject, we would love to hear from you. And so you can always connect with us, because we truly believe that we can't be an expert in it all, but we are experts in our field and our roles. And so we want to give you the platform to speak on that.
And I'll go ahead and relay a question we've received from the HUVA, but Lauren asks, is there a mirrored or partner organization to yours in the Bay Area or Northern California?
It's a great question. So I'm going to tell you, we are working on that right now. I'm actually located in Davis and had been working for a local organization here in policy and legislation. And so we are working to support families in Northern California as well. Our focus has been LA, but that is our goal. And I will tell you that we carry a care line, which is just real-time support. It's really helping caregivers de-escalate or get resources they need. And we never turn down any calls that come in through our care line or anyone who wishes services. So if we had somebody in Northern California who wanted peer mentoring or to go to Coffee with Caregivers or to be in our Tay group, we would not deny them. We are not officially funded in Northern California, but we'd love to get there. And I saw Alexis too. I think Alexis, you're in this meeting. I would love to have CYC, really come on to our Tay meetings or even Coffee with Caregivers to share about the different chapters throughout the state. I know my own son's interaction, although it wasn't huge, I just saw him brighten up and feel like he was a part of something special, something that mattered to him when he was involved in CYC.
We have another question incoming from the chat, but one person asked, how would you encourage the youth to support the idea of getting away from the influences that keep them from seeking help, moving forward to change their path and generations?
That is a great question. I would say that I would refer them again to CYC, to an organization that focuses on that and is surrounded by their peers. I think empowerment comes from the opportunity, right? Not from a handoff of a stick, but an opportunity to get involved. And I think our history with our systems is that we've taken all autonomy and choice away from youth who are experiencing foster care. And we have said, you'll go to court here, you're going to go to school there, you're going to live in this home. We've taken all of those choices away. And so for us to just expect them to take them back without an opportunity to get that power, to find their own internal power and write their own story, it is difficult. But I think organizations like CYC, JBay, different youth-led type organizations are really the key. The rest of us can support, right? But I think, again, we're adults and we have our role, we have our importance. But I think personal engagement and empowerment comes from a space where they're surrounded by their own peers who have walked that walk and have embraced that space.
Yeah, and if I could add to that also, don't assume they know where to turn or they know where to go. It's better to hear the same information a million times over than to assume they've heard it once. So don't be afraid to just keep giving them resources, keep reiterating it. The more we hear something, the more it actually starts to cling to us. So just keep, even if they don't listen to you the first, second, 12th, 20th time, keep it going. Keep telling them where to turn, keep giving them the website, the different groups who text. Kids love texting. So definitely organizations that provide text options are great. So just keep reiterating it. Also, surround them with maybe resources that don't outwardly present them as help, but can empower them. So like the youth-led podcast, self-taught, tell them, oh, here's a podcast for you. Podcasts are very hip and trendy. The more they start listening to those episodes, the more they'll start to feel like they can make those changes. And they might hear a topic that you once talked to them about. And so they'll be like, okay, I heard it here. I know you gave me this resource. I'd love to circle back. And they can start then taking the steps for change. So definitely just keep at it also, because a lot of times we don't want to be told, that we need to change or so-and-so knows best, but the more we hear it, the more it's going to empower. So keep that up.
Do we have any additional questions or just comments? You want to share an experience? We'd love to hear from you guys. I know we're coming up on time, but we have a few more minutes.
And I appreciate those who are dropping links in the chat.
This isn't so much of a question, so much as a opinion that someone had dropped in the chat.
Mhm.
But their opinion is always meet the youth where they are at. Never come into a situation where a youth, assuming that they will be receptive to blanket interactions. What are your thoughts on that opinion?
Absolutely spot on, right? We know that about youth in general, but youth who have experienced adults who are just, telling them where to show up, what to do, those kind of things. Absolutely. You got to meet people where they're at. That goes for even adults, right? But meeting people where they're at and listening, being an active listener. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in our organization is caregivers who bring their own biases or their own thought process or political beliefs or whatever into conversations, and getting them to understand it's not about you agreeing or disagreeing. It's about giving space for that youth to talk openly, to live the way that they want to live within the safety constructs, right? Because we know kids under 18, there is a legal responsibility, but meeting them where they're at without trying to change their mind, convince them, or put your own bias into things. So I think you're spot on.
And also meeting them where they're at. And, consent also looks like, letting them choose for themselves. And so when you are talking to youth, instead of being like, you're going to this appointment on this date, instead of saying like, hey, this appointment is coming up. What days work for you? Like, what do you have going on at school, after school activities? Start putting things in their court, meeting them where they're at so that they can start to build the autonomy of making their own decisions. I think that's a huge part, instead of lecturing down, like you're going to this appointment, it's, oh, hey, every year we got to do a wellness appointment. What days work? Everyone hates Mondays. So, it's like, what works for you? So I think also that's something that's important is meet them where they're at and let them choose what works well for them. Of course, like Dana said, within a certain degree, but start empowering them. I've said it so many times, empowerment, but I think that's the biggest thing is we need to empower our youth to advocate for themselves, but also know that they're supported by the adults that are on their team. So yeah.
And autonomy comes with being able to make decisions. If we're not allowing decision making up to age 18, how in the world are we expected the 18th birthday decisions are being made, right? Or positive decisions. So I know we're coming up on time, but I think, this transcends into parenting in general, right? And so, I think we have to start remembering that we're preparing people for adulthood or allowing space for autonomy in adulthood. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Alexa, we shared the QR code. We have a whole resource page with all kinds of stuff on it for you on our Fostering Unity website. This conference has been wonderful. I hope you have a great lunch and you join for sessions 3 and 4.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.